And thank you so much for joining us for today's live webinar focusing on 3 strategies that will help you widen your hiring pool. My name is Jennifer Watkins, and I head up marketing at Mountain Leverage. Mountain Leverage develops and provides solutions such as voice picking, robotics, data analytics, and other innovative technology for warehouses and other organizations to improve their operations. We're thrilled to have some of the most seasoned and knowledgeable experts in the industry here with us today to talk about solutions for organizations who are experiencing, like many others now as a result of the pandemic, a shortage of available labor, difficulty retaining new hires, and keeping up with skyrocketing customer demand. I'd like to introduce Scott Zahn, who heads up our field teams across North America. Scott has helped hundreds of organizations transform their supply chain and fulfillment operations with a unique focus on productivity enhancements and operating cost reductions. We'll also be hearing today from Eric Salicce, our Senior Solution Business Consultant and one of the world's top-ranked support experts for Vocalect voice picking technology, with decades of expertise in partner and end-user training and implementation. At the end of today's session, we have planned time for your questions. So as you think of questions, please type them into the Q&A form here in Zoom. If we don't get to all of them, don't worry, we'll make sure to send you an answer later. One final note, we are recording today's session so that we can make it available to those who weren't able to make it today. If you have any issues hearing the presenters or if you need anything else during today's webinar, please send me a note in the chat box. And now, without further ado, I'll give the floor to Scott.
Thanks, Jen. Let me start with the agenda. So I'm going to take us through some of the trends that should align with what you're seeing today in your market or your geographies. And then Eric will tie back the 3 keys that are really the basis for this webinar. Eric will also share some insights or observations from the field, things we've seen from our customers and just businesses in general. And then we'll wrap it up with the Q&A. Don't forget, there is a Q&A icon at the bottom of each screen. By all means, if you have questions at any time, please type them in. It'll add to the quality of the event, and I think it'll allow us to answer some things that people are thinking about in general. All right, so from there, let's jump in, and we'll start with a study that was done by the Material Handling Institute in 2020. The MHI is fairly well known in our industry, and they talked about the top trends, the top supply chain challenges of 2020. And number 1 on that list was, of no surprise, the hiring qualified workers. 65% of the respondents, one of the largest single response items on the survey, were hiring qualified workers. It is a challenge we're seeing literally all over the globe, but most importantly throughout North America. Number 2, 3, and 4 were also significant. They talked about 56% of the respondents had were wrestling with customers who were constantly demanding a lower cost or arguing about pricing. Customer demands around faster response times. We see lots of that, especially in e-commerce, right? And then finally, 53% of the respondents said their 4th biggest challenge was increasing competitive intensity around or based on a changing topography of customer expectations. From there, I want to share with you basically what are the trends that we're seeing in some of the work we're doing today. And the number 1 trend, which aligns completely with the MHI study, is around labor, right? The challenge that we see consistently from customers, from prospects, from just people we mingle with in terms of trade groups, finding people to work in our buildings, in distribution centers, or in the distribution operation of manufacturing companies has been the number 1 challenge as we came into the second half of 2020, and has continued right through 2021, and it seems not to be letting up at all. Number 2 on that list is globalization, right? And as the economy, or as the world, industrial world basically exists on all 4 corners of the globe, we see a tremendous impact on downward pricing pressure due to the consistent and accelerating change in the global economy. What this means is that pretty much from any corner of the earth, you can see competition at any point in time. Additionally, the 3rd thing we're seeing is disruption. Right. And we're seeing that suppliers in particular, your peers, need to be nimble as markets are changing frequently, and the need to respond to those changes, whether it be product changes, pricing changes, service changes, it doesn't seem to go away, and it seems to be challenged at every step or in every market we do business in, or our prospects or customers do business in. And then finally, the character I'm going to share with you is Uncle Sam. This is one everyone's probably familiar with, but in the post-pandemic economy, following all the support programs that have been put in place, it's an odds-on favor that the payback for these programs is going to find itself resting squarely on the shoulders of businesses. So what do all four of these trends have in common? All four of them have cost implications, and those cost implications are really pretty dramatic and generally quite severe. So what we're seeing across the board, all right, are some interesting trends and some interesting details. First off, based on the Bureau of Labor Statistics, when we look at the last 3 years or so, the retirement rate of baby boomers is approaching, really is exceeding 10,000 people a day. Now, not on any given day do 10,000 people to retire, but when we look at it on an annualized basis in 2020 and 2019, it averaged at 10,000 people a day. And right now, the statistics are suggesting it's even going to be higher in 2022. What that means is that people who are coming into the workforce, the applicants for the jobs that we all have posted out there, tend to be what are known by sociologists as millennials or Gen Zs. And in fact, many of them were not born in this country, but what they all have in common is they grew up with mobile phones in their hands. In fact, they have been called the mobile phone generation, and there's good reason for that. But these applicants, they're different. They're comfortable with mobile technology, and they're comfortable with interacting with a device and using their voice, and their expectations reflect their expectations for work, and their expectations for how they want to work is reflected by them and their mobile peers across the global panorama. So the question I think you need to ask yourself as you sit here and think about what we're talking about today is, are you, as an employer, are you appealing to the individuals that are coming to look for these jobs today? From here, I want to share with you what many on Wall Street call the gap, right? There's a growing cadre of analysts and economists who believe that the e-commerce paradigm has changed the number of employees we need, and that we'll get to when we get to, air quotes, full employment coming out of this current economic environment. But when we look at the gap as it exists today between February or so of 2020, before the pandemic, and today, right, we are trying to fill this gap in every one of our businesses. And the challenge that exists for all of us is, how do we return to full employment, or perhaps even greater than full employment statistics? How do we appeal to people to close this gap, and how do we get them to come to work in your individual operation or your individual distribution center? So as I wrap this up, let me wrap this segment on trends. Let me share some common perceptions that I'd really like to challenge today. First one is, good hires need to have distribution center experience before they come to work in your building. The second one is that English is absolutely required in order to be able to work in a distribution center in North America. The training, lengthy training programs, the kind that we've talked about for years in many different industries, the longer it is, the better it's going to be. And that finally, there's no one out there that really wants to work. Right? I think that when you think about this, there are options out there. And I'd like to switch or transition over to Eric and let him share with you some of the things that we think may allow you to, A, appeal to a greater number of applicants who come to work, who come looking for jobs in your operations, and B, deal with the economic pressures that you face day in and day out in a traditional distribution operation.
Perfect. Thanks, Scott. So as Scott was saying, there are many factors that play into your hire and maintain for engaging your workforce, the ability to do that. And each warehouse or distribution center that we encounter is unique. So one size doesn't always fit all. What works for one may not necessarily work for the next one. So what Mountain Leverage does best is we work with you to identify the exact solution that meets your needs. And it often involves using technology. So some of our things we're going to counter right now is the 3 key strategies to hiring and maintaining employees. And first one would be mobile friendly technology. Now with the generation that's coming into the workforce, they're very familiar with smaller more hands-on technology. Also, the ability to be multilingual. People want to be able to speak in their natural native language, and giving them that ability in the workforce is empowering and provides them with an opportunity to not only work and be productive for the company, but also feel good about what they're doing. And last but not least, certainly need to make sure that they're getting up to speed in an expedited amount of time. Traditionally speaking, it takes a long time to get workers familiarized with a process and optimized. Well, we want to shorten that gap and find opportunities to do that. So before we do that, just kind of stepping back, think about the technology that goes into distribution centers. There's various technologies. If you think 20, 30 years ago, think back to there were some green screens and terminals, and even the devices themselves. They had small screens with a lot of buttons that were on them, so very heavy, bigger devices. Well, the technology has improved significantly over generation, and now folks are familiar with buttonless technology, where it's just a glass screen. So you're not necessarily pressing a button, but more or less an icon. Even to the point where we're using voice to speak to our home units that are here. We want to incorporate that. And what are some of the things that we are doing to incorporate that into the workforce? So one of the things we're doing is mobile-friendly technical solutions. So because people are very familiar with this type of hands-on technology, there's a variety of things that we can do to kind of leverage that. So one of them being hands-free, eyes-free solution with using voice, where they would wear a headset and they can get short audible commands to perform activities throughout the workday. This is one where we can use that and also kind of leverage into the multilingual aspect, where we can now speak in a native language. The workers are more focused, they're more attuned to the technology side of things. So they're more likely to like what they're doing. And the longer they like what they're doing, the longer they're going to stay at their place of employment. Another thing we're seeing out there is the autonomous mobile robots, the AMRs, where I think in the past, people were feeling a little bit more like it was intrusive for robotics. And the question comes up a lot is, are robots replacing my workforce? And the answer is no, they're not replacing it. They're working alongside of it. So now we can have a robotic implementation where the solution goes to a specific spot or location within a distribution center, and the worker can now walk over, perform the activities of whatever is required using a tablet or something that would have a screen based. They can now easily type in what they want, and they're sort of sharing that space and using it so that they can now easily pick or perform some activities, and then have the robot go off and go to the next location, and so on and so forth. So final is not only are we hiring for employees that are going to be the workers, the pickers, the packers, whatever's going to be required for a distribution center, you also have to hire for your management positions. And management positions also want to be able to use mobile technology within their own solutions. They don't want to have to go back to the green screen and distribute work a certain way. They want to have it more accessible at their hands for either a tablet or mobile phone or some other type of solution like that. So along those lines, we also mentioned about the voice enablement. Well, voice enablement, we have multilingual operations. There are some customers that would come to us and they want to have English only. And what we could do is we take the data that comes from a host solution, and we can speak back some short command to tell an operator to do something or perform an activity. And they can reply back in English. And also we have the ability that we could take that same data, and using a small device, we can actually translate that data into a variety of languages. We have several customers that are using Spanish. We have some that are using Swedish. We have some that are using Finnish, variety of Mandarin. So there's a wide variety, many, many different languages that they have. They could also even do a blended approach. We've had some customers say, hey, look, I want to have my data come down in English, but can I still have the workers speak in their native language? And yes, we can train the system so that now that whatever utterance they speak, we can actually have them speak in their native tongue, and they feel, again, more empowered while they're actually out there in the workforce. So I do have a headset here. Actually, I have two headsets where it would provide with the the details back to the operator. So here, let me place this right here.
Good night. To receive work, say ready.
So that's an example of an English headset where it would speak to the operator in English. And then I also have another headset set up for this operator where it's speaking in Spanish.
Manténgase en silencio por algunos segundos.
And so simply by having different headsets for different operators, easy to maintain, the same exact system, have the data come down and speak to them in the appropriate language. And again, that makes them feel a little bit more in tune with what they're doing at work. So one example we have of this is a customer came to us and they had a challenge where they needed to be productive in about a 1 week time frame. And they said, hey, look, we are hiring a pool of workers that we're going to have as contract to hire, and we would like to have them speak or have it available in their native language. In this particular situation, it was Spanish. And so what we did is within a 1 week time frame, we got all their information translated. We trained their trainer along with the trainers themselves, trained the workforce that was there under our supervision, and they were productive in approximately 1 day. So along those lines, it does kind of lend hand in hand with how do we simplify that training process? So many times you go on site and you see that it's going to take an operator a week, 2 weeks, a month to become productive. And so we're seeing with a variety of different technologies or non-technologies that it takes such a long time. And so that's not acceptable in today's workforce, is that they need to be more productive in a faster time frame. So what we're finding is we can actually get that time frame down from weeks or months down to days or even hours by using voice. In addition, some of the techniques we use for this is we have different things that we would have for learning capability. For example, there's actually a mobile training solution where the operators can audibly listen to what's going on in the warehouse or listen to the commands that they would have, and they can visually see on a screen something that's happening. So it's a good way of doing it because people learn differently. They listen and audibly learn, and they can visually learn, and they can do both at the same time. So we find it gets a little bit more, they're retaining the knowledge a little bit better for that one. We also have the ability with a pocket picking guide. We provide this to all the customers so that they can now see the exact dialogue of what's expected to be spoken to them and what's going to be spoken by them. And even before we go on site, our Mountain Leverage support site, we have a variety of videos that are out there that we send to our customers, and we give them so that they can build out a training program so it simplifies the onboarding process. One of the things that we see is we've had a handful of customers that have started in the morning shift, and they've gone through the necessary training steps, and they have been productive by lunchtime. That's a very fast turnaround compared to the other technologies that we've seen. So another example of this one was where they were able to pick their first order. This is a customer quote here that we had. They were able to pick their first order within 30 minutes. And this was another situation where it was a contract to hire, and they found a high retention rate. It was a much higher retention rate of the employees because they were more attuned with what's going on with the technology, and they felt more empowered and comfortable by doing that. And they found a much higher success rate than using other technologies. So this is a tried and true way of being able to retain an employee pool and going out there.
All right. Well, Eric and Scott, thank you so much for those 3 key strategies. Before we jump into Q&A, Scott, I was wondering if you could summarize today's session and our key takeaways in just a few sentences.
Sure, Jen. As the business community finds its new normal, help wanted signs seem to dominate distributions in cities and towns all across North America. They're signs of every size, and candidly, they've got incentives and offers unlike anything I've ever seen before. Applicants show up, they're ready for a new challenge. They They want to do the work, but the thing we're seeing so often is most do not even last the first week, and those who do stay with it beyond a week struggle to hit the provisional objectives typically associated with the job. For many years, the distribution centers or distribution organizations have wrestled with this growing challenge, and right now in particular, with labor being the challenge that it is, and the whole notion of cost controls sitting there in a second position as something that everyone is concerned about. And we layer onto that what I sense will be the post-pandemic push from e-commerce and the need for even more workers and even more cost control, right? The challenges only multiply. So as a recap, there are really three ideas around finding talent and expanding your labor pool. The first one is to embrace the mobile friendly technologies. This is what the people who are coming to the workforce today are using before they get there. And it's something that we think, based on what we're seeing from our customer base and samples throughout the country, we think it's something they will embrace and enjoy using going forward. The second one is the world is flat, at least according to Tom Friedman, and language and culture should not prevent people from working in your building. For a long time, we thought everyone had to come from the same culture and speak English the way I speak English. But the reality is that there's a huge base of people who want to work and want to work hard and just need to think about this initiative slightly differently from your perspective, and you'll be able to attract and retain those people. And finally, it's time to challenge the status quo around training programs. Right? The reality is that you can have a new associate fill out their paperwork by 10 a.m. and contributing to your standards, your productive standards, by noon that day. It's not a far-fetched pipe dream. It is reality in warehouses all over the country today. So these three realities have really transformed some of the top distribution centers around the globe. Many of your peers came to us or had conversations with us, really looking to improve productivity and accuracy. But what they found was so much more. They had a platform and a environment that allowed them to attract and retain talent unlike anything they'd seen before. And I think both from the employee side and the employer side, there's been a happy match and a synergy that really has been pretty much unmatched so far in the industrial community.
Great. Thank you, Scott. We have about 5 minutes left today. So I'll just remind everyone, if you have a question, please go ahead and enter it in our Q&A form at the bottom of the Zoom screen. We have a few questions already. So first up is a great one. This question says, I have employees who speak 4 different languages. Does that mean I need to have 4 different languages to do this? And is that possible? Eric, how would you like to take that one?
Sure. Yeah. I think it means they have 4 separate employees. They're speaking 4 different languages throughout their workforce. So I'm kind of thinking from that standpoint. And the short answer is yes. You can absolutely, as you can see, I did that little demonstration right there. I had English and Spanish, and they're actually talking to my same system. So it's all the same. You can actually have multiple languages very easily. And I am going to go back to that example where we had the customer that it was a pool supply company that around mid-May, they reached out to us and they said, hey, we really need to explore this one. And they were going to explore several languages. And ultimately they decided that their workforce was going to be English and Spanish was primarily the ones that they wanted to focus on. So in order to be able to do that, it was a very quick turnaround. To get that enabled. We enabled it in the system, set it up so that the devices were able to actively speak whatever the headset's operator was, whatever their native language was. So yeah, we can handle multiple languages. And again, going back, we have customers that speak a variety of ones, Spanish, English, Finnish, French. We have a handful that are there.
All right. Thanks, Eric. Our next question is, we get people hired quickly, but then they consistently never show up. How can I address that problem? Thanks for that question. Scott, what do you think about that one?
Well, I think you really got to think about the demographics and the people who are coming to these jobs today, right? So the reality is that if they're coming in, they won't work and they're looking for work, you have to ask yourself, why are they not staying, right? And we've seen this time and time again as we've visited with your peers around the country, that in many cases they just don't want to use their parents' technology. It's just that simple. I come back to that definition of millennials and Gen Zs. They are looking to do things differently, and their definition of work and their vision of work tends to be very, very different. I know that organizations who've changed their approach and their technology accordingly, and it's not a massive change of technology, it's the edge technology they're using, tend to have better results at both attracting and retaining talent on an ongoing and long-term basis.
All right. I think we have time for one more question, but don't worry if you submitted a question today, we will get back to you later today with an answer if we didn't get to it today. So this final question is, we use RF scanners today and have done so for decades. This sounds interesting, but how do we determine if it can work for us? Would one of you like to take that one?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Eric, I'm going to jump on that one. Okay. So there are a couple things that I've seen your peers do consistently, but one recurring theme that seems to be obvious is they're focusing on outcomes. In this case, the outcome they've wanted to consider is how do they attract, what's their attraction strategy, and how do they appeal to individuals who are coming in for those jobs today. It's similar to the last question I answered, quite candidly, right? But you'll have to be competitive without a doubt. In other words, there's lots of incentives, there's interesting pay scales in different geographies, but the reality is you're going to need to be competitive in order to attract talent. But as we look at tools like this, clearly there are ways to help them do things differently, right? And it is a bit of a switch, I guess, jumping away from an RF environment into a new paradigm. One of the things you could do is you start with this deck, kind of some of the concepts we talked about here, and then reach out to any one of us. There's I think Jen at the end of the slides will probably put up a web link that you can use as well. But reach out. I think just a conversation alone, I think we can get into more specific details about exact examples and things we've seen in the marketplace, and perhaps even help you refine an idea or refine some ideas you have for a solution and approach going forward.
All right, thanks, Scott. And Scott was right. There is a contact link down here on the bottom of your screen. So if you have any more questions or if you'd like to follow up on some of the ideas we talked about today, go to mountainleverage.com. That's our website. And you can contact us that way. You can also email me directly at jwatkins@mountainleverage.com. I'm putting the 3 key takeaways up here on our screen to leave us off today. We really appreciate everyone being here. We'll post a recording of today's session later on the Mountain Leverage website, so be sure to revisit that when you get a chance. Again, thank you all for joining us today for our webinar. We really appreciate your time. Have a nice day.